Good morning, everyone. Chris Conti here with Tim Takis. He's an attorney in elder law. We've been taking your calls all morning, talking about anything that you have questions on in terms of elderly care, elder law. We have Lucy, who's been on line one for a while. We're going to get to her now. Lucy, good morning.
Good morning, y'all.
Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Nashville. In my age, well, I'm just older than dirt. Leave it at that.
All right.
Mr. Dukakis, I spoke to you back in 2007 and 8. I met you at a nursing home where a little fiasco was going down, where an elderly friend of mine, who his only crime was that he was poor, had passed out from a medication error, pooped in his pants, and the state decided to put him into conservatorship, and he was off the planet 6 months later. But anyway, you were very gracious with your time, and I want to thank you again for having a conversation with me that night when, you know, the police and the media and everybody else was at that nursing home and things were running around because they deported him out of the county because he was poor. But anyway, you're in good company there with Mr. Conti.
Well, I hope so. So far, so good.
Yeah, so
You're just throwing the compliments out this morning.
Absolutely.
and I just want to say that because Chris Conti is a very sensitive person, so I could think of no better of a host than him to host something like this. But anyway, here's my questions. I got like 3. I don't expect you to answer these. I just want to put these out here. Maybe you could do a show on them.
All right.
All right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong if you have time or whatnot, but starting back in around 2003, there was a healthcare lobbyist group that went around the country, and at that time, about 3 states, it was only legal where you could force somebody to sell their IRA if one of the spouses, you know, you had to sell it all and leave that money open if one of the spouses needed to go into a nursing home. And so a lot of people thought their IRAs were protected, but in about 3 states, I think Colorado was one of them, you know, they could force to sell for you to pay off your medical debt to a hospital.
Yeah.
Well, this lobbyist group went around the United States, and they got all 50 states to pass the same law. And from what I understand, part of the Healthcare Reform Act, better known as Obamacare, has stopped from being forced to sell IRAs, not just IRAs, but your home. Because one of the other things that we're doing is if you had a certain percentage of equity in your home, you were forced as an old person, if your spouse went in or you, to sell that home to pay this hospital bill to settle your debt. So, you know, what was amazing to me is about that same time, Big Pharma had cut back on production of a lot of cancer drugs that they were using for seniors, and they drove up the price of cancer drugs to the roof. So that met at the same time, and it created a shortage, and it was just unreal. So a lot of these seniors, you know, a lot of elderly people, a lot of the poor people in this country, that's what the Widows and Orphans Act, better known as Social Security, was supposed to protect. Well, these people were being displaced like crazy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all know that Section 8 housing is gone now, by the way. So that's one thing. I want to know if the Healthcare Reform Act.
Let's start there.
Now, let me just go ahead and finish. You know, I would like Mr. Dukakis to come back and do a whole show on that. But the Healthcare Reform
Well, I'll have to ask Channel 5 about that one, about whether or not.
So let's start with her question there about, can you be forced to sell IRAs and maybe stocks and, you know, pension money, things like that, if you have to pay for some kind of elder care or, you know, some kind of estate? How does that work?
The short answer to that question is that is no, unless in some instances you're trying to qualify for public benefits.
Okay.
So let's say that, you know, you're in a nursing home and you have a house and you've got, you know, $50,000 in IRAs, and you're looking for the state Medicaid program to cover the cost of your care. The state Medicaid programs is going to say, Tim, you know, you've got $50,000 in IRAs, you know, and in order for you to qualify for these benefits, you've got to spend that down to $2,000. You know, that's just part of, you know, that just basically, no one forces you to do that.
Right.
You know, it's my choice, my decision. You know, do I want to try to qualify for the state Medicaid program, in which case I'm going to have to do something with this money. Now, the state doesn't force me to. It just says, well, here's the criteria for qualifying. Now the rules are a little bit different when we're dealing with spouses. Maybe a spouse has an IRA and her husband is in the nursing home. There are protections there, for those IRAs. The state doesn't require you to sell your house. Now, in the future, if you're an unmarried person and you go into the nursing home and Medicaid's paying your bill, you may have to. The state has a right to recoup what they paid out, but that's only for unmarried people.
Right. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
About debts and dying.
Yeah.
What kinds? Obviously, I'm not an elderly person, but say
you're getting there.
Pretty close. Working here some days.
Maybe you'll get lucky. Okay.
So, what kinds of debts? Like, say I have student loan debt.
Right.
Let's talk about typical debts. Maybe student loan debt, credit card debt. Maybe you own your house and you have a car.
Right.
So you pass away.
Right.
And
all that is
you're elderly. What kinds of, say I'm in my 60s and I have some kids and I have those kinds of debts. What kinds of things are my children then responsible for?
None of them.
None of them.
Basically, it's your estate that's responsible for paying your debts.
Meaning?
So you die and you have a house. You die, you have, maybe a small IRA or a savings account, and, all of those all of your creditors have a right to claim against those assets in order to pay, to get paid.
So that's really another reason that you should be thinking and talking about these kinds of things, because say your kids are thinking, oh, when mom and dad die, I can be counting on, some of this money from them, but if they haven't been planning and saying, oh, well, I have these debts that are going to have to be taken care of first, the kids could end up with nothing by the time the estate is settled.
Exactly.
I mean, if you have a car that needs to be finished paying for, your mortgage isn't, your 30-year mortgage isn't done.
Right.
Something.
All of that, all of your assets that, when you die are subject to the claims of your creditors. I mean, basically the way that works.
What was that, Rick? A tax? Okay, so say you have a federal tax debt upon death. Does that get leaned against your estate?
Exactly. That's what the state would call, or the federal government would call, a priority claim.
Interesting.
Yeah, which means that the state will, our state probate law, it ranks the priority of who gets paid.
Okay.
The first is administrative expenses, second is taxes, third is, mortgages are, they're subject to being paid out of your estate, those sorts of things. So.
I believe we have Eileen on line 2. Eileen, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Thanks for calling. Where are you calling from?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. And if you don't mind, would you mind telling us your age or in your range? Where are you?
50.
You're in your
50.
50s.
Okay. And what's your question for us?
If you got other siblings, and can one sibling just go and file for power of attorney without letting anybody know?
Who decides power of attorney?
Okay, the person that decides power of attorney is the person that is making the power of attorney.
Okay.
So the older person walks into my office and says, they want to do estate planning, and we will talk to them about, okay, you need a power of attorney in place, you need healthcare powers of attorney, and we're going to say, who do you want to have as your power of attorney? Is it your spouse? It's a family member, a child, whoever it is. And then do you have a first priority, second priority, successor? That's the person that decides. Now, I guess what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing her say is that. One of her siblings, went to mom or whatever, or took mom to a lawyer, or downloaded a form from the internet and filled it out and said, Mom, sign this so that I'm your power of attorney. Now, is that a valid power of attorney? It may be. But ultimately, it's the person that makes the power of attorney that is the one that makes that decision.
Interesting.
Now, if she doesn't believe that her loved one, if it's mom or whoever it is, made the right choice, then maybe they need to have a family conversation. Or if she feels that mom was not
in the right state of mind,
exactly,
maybe to make
then
the decision.
maybe, at some point, depending upon what happens next, it could be they wind up in court, where somebody is named conservator for mom.
Interesting. A lot of interesting questions here. Tim Takis, an attorney in elder law, is with us all morning here. We know there's a couple of you still on hold. We will get to your questions coming up shortly. If you would like to call in, you have any questions for us, 615-737+, 615-737+, and Morning Line will be right back.